Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batter's Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batter's Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batter's Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Microcasting for your city, Talkapolis.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Road to Cookeville. I'm Joe Williams, and I am most honored to have with me our special guest, Maurice Patton, who's a staff writer at the Tennessean and also the Secretary and Treasurer of the Tennessee Sports Writers Association, who knows as much, if not more, than anybody else about high school football in this state. 2012, everybody's trying to get to Cookeville, Tennessee. Tennessee Tech University, the last Saturday or Friday or maybe Thursday, depending on your division, in November, because that's when state championships will be decided. Maurice, welcome in. I think you're as excited about this as I am.
I really am. This is always a fun time of year for these young men and these coaches and the folks that follow these teams trying to move on to Cookeville and win a state championship. Now, if you grew up around here, this is kind of a unique thing, and if you're just moving in, it's not. But 4 years ago, and before that, Maurice, since both of us started here and grew up here, you had three classes, Class A, AA, AAA. Everybody played in one of those three, private, public, the whole 9 yards. About 4 years ago, we made the change to what in Virginia was called the Z Plan. In Tennessee, I understand we call it the playoff plan. We kind of borrowed bits and pieces of the Z Plan from Virginia and then kind of took some other things and mixed them in there, and we've got what we've got right now. Some might call it a witch's brew, but what happens now is there are 6 classifications in Division I, and we have a Division II for private schools who give financial aid, and there are 2 divisions there. So in the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to crown 8 state champions in the sport of football in Tennessee. Some would tell you that's a bunch, especially coming from our background, like you said, where you had 3. But a lot of people like it. A lot of people like having more teams get recognized and see more teams, more players be able to be successful. So we've got 3 days of it, like you said, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But to get there, it's a long road, especially, Maurice, in Division I, where in most of the divisions, at least from 3A through 6A, 32 teams will start this Friday night, the 2nd of November. In A and AA, I believe there's 24. So there's 8 teams in each of those that will get a bye. But the long story short is, come Friday night, we start playing football. Everybody's trying to get to Tennessee Tech. Start playing football, losers go home, winners move on. Now, 2 divisions, as we said in this. One is the public school. And Maurice, as we look at Division I, which is public school, there is a caveat for schools who don't give financial aid to be a part of that group. Yes, and you will see some private schools, particularly in Class 1A and 2A, that are private schools, as in not public schools, but they aren't given financial aid, like you said, so they are still competing in Division I. So we'll see those. We'll see a lot of different things. Tell you what we're going to see here for the next 20 minutes or so. Maurice and I are going to kind of break down the brackets in all the divisions, at least for teams in the Middle Tennessee area, and get a good look at what's going to happen in week number 1. After that, who knows? But we'll find out after Friday night, and we'll find out about the brackets coming up here in just a moment. You guys stay with us. We're on the road to Cookeville.
Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batter's Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batter's Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batter's Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Microcasting for your city, Talkapolis.
And welcome back, everybody, to week 1 of the Road to Cookeville. I'm Joe Williams, along with Maurice Patton, and we're going to take a look at some of the brackets. Now, a couple of things we've got to talk about before we get to those brackets is how you wind up in the playoffs. As we told you, there's 6 classes in Division I, 2 in Division II, and because some are larger than others, you get some teams in that don't have winning records. You're going to see that as we come through. Now, Maurice, part of the way this happens, the top 4 teams in every district of a 3-class system. I said 3-class because here's what happens. We still have A, AA, AAA for all sports except football. Football is split, so Class A actually splits into A and AA.
Right.
AA splits into triple and 4A. AAA splits into 5 and 6A.
Correct.
Now, we're going to give you a second here to go get yourself a pencil and piece of paper so you can keep along on this scorecard just to figure out the divisions to an extent. It's an old joke. It never did work well. But that's this only sport that we do this in. In those districts, you have teams that may compete in, for example, the 5A football championship series and the 6A championship series, and they'll compete against each other and may go separate ways when it comes playoff time.
Exactly. Take District 9 AAA in football, for example. You had 5 5A teams. You had 3 6A teams. They play together for regular season play. Basically, it's to help with scheduling, but at the same time, like you said, once playoffs start, they get separated for playoff purposes and they get put in their brackets based on their regular season records, but then they set up the brackets with other teams in their same class, whether it be 5A, 6A.
And the strange part about the different part there is the top 4 teams in each district, regardless of classification, is guaranteed a spot in the playoffs, and they're seeded that way. Once that's done, after the top 4 are done, then we start talking about wild cards.
Well, what happens basically is everybody that is a district champion gets seeded first. Everybody that's a district runner-up gets seeded second, whether they are 5A or 6A or whether they're 3A or 4A. And then your wild cards come in after that, and they fill out the rest of those teams. 32 in classes 3A through 6A, 24 in classes 1A and 2A.
Thinking back, you're exactly right. Just how far back am I thinking? In the old days, it was every top 4. You can still be 3rd or 4th in a district, and depending on your class, you may not get in.
Right.
It's only the top 2.
Yeah. I think 7 AAA, for instance, I think all 4 of their teams got into the 6A playoffs. Typically, if you finish top 4, you're going to get in, but it's not necessarily a guarantee. It's not necessarily a given.
Let's start taking a look at some of the brackets that'll be playing this Friday night. And Maurice, in Class Single A, really only one game that affects us here in this area. Nashville Christian at 8-2 is the number 3 seed. They're at home against McEwen, 3-7.
That's one of the fallacies when you look at the 1A and 2A brackets in particular, when you're talking about 24 teams and in light of the number of teams that play in those 2 classifications. And another oddity, if you will, about that particular matchup is Nashville Christian and McEwen are both in the same district, both coming out of District 10A. They've played already once this year. Nashville Christian won that game. Rematch Friday night at NCS.
How tough is it for a team in the playoffs to play the team again the second time and still win?
I think it's a little bit tougher, particularly for the team that has won that first game, because you know that the team that lost the first time around has a little extra motivation and that kind of thing working for them. So, and getting your team up when they've already beaten a team the first time around is really kind of a tough thing for a coaching staff. So that's what Jeff Brothers and his guys are faced with, getting their team ready for McEwen this week.
Class AA, which is the top half of Single A in every other sport, has no games in our area. None of our teams actually qualified for the playoffs. So we'll go to Class AAA in football. And this creates some interesting matchups, my friend. Let's start with looking at Cheatham County. The Cubs, 10-0. You think that place is on fire for their high school football team right now? 10-0, a number 1 seed. I know our friend Carol Stewart's going crazy.
Absolutely. You know, Cheatham County really got off to a great start this year. They beat a really good Fairview team and kind of served notice to a bunch of folks. Got a lot of attention with that win. and they've just kind of picked up steam as they went all season. Like you said, 10-0, number 1 seed, by far the best year that they've had over in Ashland City in a long time, and they're excited about Grundy County coming in there for the first round here Friday night.
So Grundy County comes in 5-5, Mo. We don't know maybe as much about Grundy County, more of an East State team than a Middle Tennessee team, but they're coming off the mountain down there. You just never know.
You know, absolutely. They're going to come in here and probably a little upset about having to go on the road, but coming in here and they're going to take something to Cheatham County, and I'm sure it'll be a physical ball game. Cheatham County's been a run-oriented club all year, pounding it out. They've got a couple of 1,000-yard rushers. Should be an interesting ball game.
The next interesting game, kind of in that same bracket as a matter of fact, whoever wins Cheatham County and Grundy County, that contest will wind up facing the winner of the Fairview at Smith County game. The Yellow Jackets out of Williamson County 7-3 on the year, Smith County 8-2. And Maurice, this is a 4-5 seed. Smith County the 4th seed, Fairview the 5th seed in this particular quadrant. I think a lot of folks, including Fairview, expected a little more out of their season.
Yeah, like I said earlier about Cheatham County, they lost. Fairview loses to Cheatham County in their opener. Then they drop one to Page about week 4 or 5, I think it was. That was a big district game for them, big county rivalry game as well. Then they lose another district game to Giles County, which has been ranked number 1 in 4A all season. So, you know, Chris Hughes and that bunch out there, they've built a lot of momentum. They've really built that program up. I think they expected a little bit more than a 5 seed this year, but had some injuries that they've had to overcome, and I think they've got that thing rolling right now. Smith County is a team that has been a number 1 seed a couple of years in the past and hasn't done especially well in the playoffs at home. So I think Fairview's got a shot to go up there and maybe pull off the upset up in Carthage.
What they got to be careful for in Carthage, Fairview can be explosive offensively. They can put points on the board quickly.
In a hurry.
In a big hurry. A couple of other games in the AAA category. This one kind of interesting. Almost a neighborhood rivalry, or at least a crosstown rivalry, if you will, when Good Pasture out of Madison travels down towards the Brentwood area to take on CPA, Christ Presbyterian. CPA 10-0, number 2 seed in their bracket. Good Pasture 5-5. But I mean, Good Pasture at 5-5 has played a pretty tough schedule.
They have. They've played a tough schedule. They've had some injuries. You know, this probably isn't one of the better Good Pasture teams over the last few years, but David Martin does a great job over there, and he's going to have those guys ready coming into the playoffs. Always been a perennial playoff program, perennial playoff team, and they will have some familiarity as well with CPA from the standpoint that this will be the 4th time those two teams have played in the last 2 years.
We go to Class 4A. First game we'll look at, Lipscomb Academy, 5-5 out of here in Nashville. It used to be David Lipscomb High School. They've changed to Lipscomb Academy. On the road at Giles County. Giles County, 10-0, number 1 seed. They're just always good.
The thing about Giles County, as you've watched that team all season perform, they've put up a lot of points, but at the same time, they've not given up a whole lot of points. Their defense has been underrated and has done a great job all year. They've got a Mr. Football candidate at quarterback in Al Cobb. They won the state in 4A in 2009 with a Mr. Football, Bo Wallace, who you can now see on Saturdays at Ole Miss. So that program has done a really good job down there.
Another game in 4A that's equally interesting, but maybe for different reasons, and that is Page at 6-4, traveling to Signal Mountain at 7-3. Signal Mountain, a number 3 seed, and Maurice, there's a little blood in the eyes with the Signal Mountain Eagles. 2 years ago, they win the state championship, and then last year, as they looked or expected to repeat as state champions, they got caught in a turmoil, if you will, over a transfer, and wound up vacating most of their victories, and because of that, didn't make the playoffs at a time when they thought they had a real hot shot.
They really did. They thought they had a really good team last year to follow up on that championship from last year, the year before. Sorry, and as you said, they'll be loaded for bear when Page rolls in there. Page going in off of a couple of losses to end the season as well. So.
But a much better season, I think, this year for Page than maybe or most of us expected. Maybe they didn't, but I think they've exceeded my expectations.
I think they probably caught a few of us by surprise.
Yeah. A couple of others. Marshall County 5-5. Got to go to Chattanooga. Faced East Hamilton at 9-1.
Marshall County, we were mentioning Page having lost a couple of games to end the season. One of those was at Marshall County, 28-27 on a Thursday night. And Marshall County has started to kind of pull things together. They had a coaching change right before the start of preseason, kind of threw them into a little bit of a tailspin early on, I think. But they've kind of bounced back and regathered themselves a little bit.
Maplewood gets to be at home as a 3 seed, 6-4 on the season, taking on 6-4 Crockett County. And that is a long drive from Crockett County.
There's no short way to get here from Crockett County. Trust me, I went to school in West Tennessee. And Maplewood is another team that kind of hit a little bit of a skid there mid-late season, started to get things back at the end of the year, and they will be ready going into the playoffs.
The other one in this particular Class 4A, we've got White House. Blue Devil Pride underway. They're a 2 seed at 5-5. They're a 2 seed. And they'll be at home versus Chester County, who's also 5-5.
Jeff Porter at White House always has those guys ready to play. Like you said, 5-5, getting a 2 seed. That's an interesting dynamic of the playoffs. Playing another 5-5, that's about as even as it gets right there.
We go to Class 5A, and this is where it starts to get interesting. And we'll open up with the game that maybe is most interesting of all for no other reason than the participants and the way they got there. Columbia, the number 1 seed at 8-2, will get to be at home. They thought their opponent was going to be Cleveland High School. Instead, they will face Sullivan South out of Sullivan County. Sullivan County 5-5. And they come with a great deal of controversy. Maurice, this plan has so many moving parts to it that eventually you kind of knew this was eventually going to happen. But long story short, on last Saturday when the brackets were announced, Cleveland was announced as going to Columbia. They found an error. Cleveland removed. Sullivan South rightly in the playoffs. But instead of changing everything around the state, or at least in the quadrant in 5A, decision was made, send them to Columbia. It's a 5-6 hour trip from Sullivan to Murray County.
That's not going to be a lot of fun for those guys. But, you know, it's one of those situations where when you get so deep in the wild cards and the tiebreakers and that kind of thing, there was a situation where Sullivan South had played a team that had played 11 games, a team from North Carolina, I believe it was. And the way the tiebreaker rules are set up for Tennessee, the 11th game shouldn't have counted, or it was just really a technicality that got missed by the state office staff as they were putting that thing together. As a result, Cleveland was one of the 32 teams in 5A to get into the playoffs. Then once you get your 32 teams and you split them up into 4 8-team quadrants, obviously. Once it was found that Sullivan South should have been in instead of Cleveland, rather than reseeding all of Quadrant 1 and putting Sullivan South where they should have been, to affect the fewest number of teams, they elected to send Sullivan South to Columbia in Cleveland's place.
And probably a good decision because logistically, realistically, common sense, it was the only thing they could do.
Unless you're Sullivan South.
Well, I grant you, but I'm kind of backing them up right now. Tullahoma is at home against White County. Tullahoma 4-6, Tullahoma 6-4, White County's 4-6.
You talked a little bit about underachievers maybe. Tullahoma is a team that I think more people expected more out of this season. They lost some seniors, but they had some talent back from a pretty good ball club last year. This gives them a chance to kind of redeem themselves to a degree against a White County team.
One of the few schools that has the big jumbo board, and I'm telling you, their stadium 3 years ago was condemned. They got together, they replaced it, and they did a heck of a job in Tullahoma. The big game of the night, Beach number 1 seed, 10-0, takes on Kenwood. Beach probably the number 1 seed in the whole shooting match.
They've been ranked number 1 in 5A for most of the season, certainly since they went to Henry County, the defending 5A champ, beat them 55-41, I think, in week 1 maybe. Saw one of the best single game performances by a high school athlete in this state. Jalen Hurd, the running back for Beach, rushes for 451 yards on nearly 40 carries. I think it's third all-time in Tennessee for single game rushing totals. and they have just been on a roll ever since then.
One of the big one here in town in Nashville, it's the Metro contest between Hillsboro at 6-4 going on the road to Antioch 6-4. It's a 4 and 5 seed contest. And what does the winner get as a prize? They get to face the winner of the Beach Kenwood contest. But Maurice, I'll guarantee you either one of those teams will be more than happy to go up to Beach.
They'll certainly take their chances, both of them, particularly Hillsboro. That's a team that had not been in the playoffs since they won the 4A state championship in 2008. They're working on their second coach since then. Craig Clayton comes in first year, and he's got the Burros in the playoffs here, playing against an Antioch team that's also enjoying some success of late, making their second straight playoff appearance and hoping to build on what they did last year when they made it to the first round and got bounced.
Speaking of making it the second time in a row, Centennial, the Cougars get a home game at 6-4. They'll be taking on 5-5 Portland down in Franklin.
You got to like what Brian Richter has been able to do at Centennial. As you said, another team, another program that had not had a lot of postseason success, hadn't been to the postseason in some time. In 2 years, this is their second appearance now.
And the last game we'll look at, Station Camp 5-5 goes to Clarksville Northeast at 7-3. Northeast a 2 seed. Winner of this one will face the winner of Centennial Portland.
And the X factor in this ball game is Jalen Reeves-Maben for Northeast, a University of Tennessee commitment who has been a little banged up the last few weeks, has played sparingly or not at all. Last week against Northwest did not play. His availability for Station Camp Friday night is kind of questionable, and this is a guy who does it all on both sides of the ball for Northeast. He'll line up at quarterback, he'll line up at receiver, he'll play linebacker. He's probably going to be a safety when he gets to Knoxville next year, but wherever he plays, he's a guy that you've got to account for if you're on the other sidelines, and without him, kind of changes the complexion of the ball game.
Does he wash the uniforms when it's over, too?
He
does
may
everything
very well.
else. Wow. All right, tell you what, that's the first 5 classes. We still got Class 6A and Division II to look at, and we'll do that right after this on the road to Cookeville.
Microcasting for your city. Talkapolis.
Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batters Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batters Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batters Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Microcasting for your city. Talkapolis.
And welcome back, everybody, to the road to Cookeville. This is week number 1. It's the opening round of action in the TSSAA State High School Football Championship playoffs here in the state of Tennessee. I'm Joe Williams, along with Tennessean staff writer Maurice Patton. And Maurice, you've given us such great information on the first 5. I can't wait to hear what we've got left. 6A, the Granddaddy Group. And a couple of things we're going to talk about here in a second, because this one kind of felt funny, but just because football is so strong in Rutherford County. Let's open up with the first game we're going to be watching this week. That's the number 1 seed in this quadrant, and that's Siegel at 10-0 taking on Oakland at 6-4. They're out of the same district. They've already played each other once.
You know, they're not just out of the same district, but they're out of the same side of Murfreesboro. You could almost walk from one campus to the other, and you know that might not be a bad idea for some folks Friday night, and from a parking standpoint. But like you said, Siegel's already beaten Oakland once. Siegel's beaten. Well, obviously they've beaten everybody, but they've beaten everybody by a pretty big margin as well. They played Independence a couple of weeks ago and won 21-14. That was their closest game all year. It was the first and only time they've been held below 35 points, I think. So they've been getting it done offensively, defensively as well. They've been holding people down. So this is a team that's folks are going to have to reckon with here going down the stretch toward Cookeville, and if they don't get there, they're certainly going to have a say in who does.
Their senior quarterback, Stockstill, as good as I think any I've seen on the high school level in a long time.
Well,
around here anyway.
He comes by it naturally.
Well, boy, isn't that the truth?
His daddy was a quarterback at Florida State, and he's currently the coach at MTSU, so Brent kind of knows what he's doing back there.
Another game we'll watch, Blackman 7-3 at Cookeville 5-5. This is a 4 and 5 seed. Blackman 7-3, a 5 seed, having to go on the road. And what do you get if you win on the road? You get to go on the road the next week and catch the winner of the Siegel-Oakland game.
Exactly. Blackman coming out of that same district as Eagle and Oakland, like you said, at 7 AAA. Some folks call it one of the toughest districts, not in the state of Tennessee, but in the country. And so Blackman is obviously tested and ready, even as they go in as a 5 seed to go on the road to Cookeville. Cookeville is a team that's in a little bit of transition. They've had a coaching change prior to this season, and so Blackman going up there, they've got a shot to get back and face either Siegel or Oakland.
Next game, Cane Ridge, 8-2. The guys from out in the Antioch area, 8-2 at home against a 7-3 Riverdale team out of Murfreesboro that has championships in its background. And Maurice, it is hard to believe Riverdale is 7-3, and there are folks calling for coaches.
Well,
7-3.
I think that's what happens, though, when you build expectations. And like you said, when you've got championships in your pocket, when you've got deep traditions like Riverdale has had, and then when you go on the road like Riverdale is this year for the first time in a while that they've had to open on the road. And so people get a little spoiled sometimes, I guess. But Riverdale going on the road to Cane Ridge, a team that is in its 4th year of varsity play, making their first playoff appearance, and should be one of the more interesting dynamics, one of the more interesting games of the first round of the playoffs.
Having seen Cane Ridge play earlier this year, I can tell you they're one tough little group of players. They're going to be okay. The other half, where I was headed earlier with we got to talk about, you realize that based on this and the brackets, you could come out of 7 AAA and not play anybody except the folks in your district through 2 rounds, 3 rounds?
Exactly. And again, that's one of the tough parts about the brackets as they fall this year. And again, we talked earlier about it, just the familiarity and the rematches and trying to get folks up for teams when you're playing them a second time. That's going to be the challenge for some of these teams as they go down the playoff path.
Also facing a big challenge, our own McGavock Raiders right here out of Nashville. They're 5-5. They got to go on the road to Dixon County, where the Cougars are back on top, 9-1 and a number 1 seed in their quad.
Yeah, Dixon County coming off of a loss to Henry County in their final regular season game, which was actually in week 9. They had a bye week 10. So Dixon County went into that final game with a chance to go 10-0 for the first time in 25 years or so, I think, and lost 21-7. But a really tough group over there. Started to catch a bunch of folks' notice early in the year when they beat Columbia 28-0 in a televised game, and just kept that momentum all season. And I'm sure Troy Williams will have those guys ready to bounce back, having lost that game, had a bye week, 2 weeks to kind of work on getting some kinks out and getting ready for the playoffs.
And maybe putting in something new for all we know. The other game, whoever wins that one, McGavock-Dixon County, will catch the winner of Independence, 6-4 at Mount Juliet, 9-1. Yeah, it's a 4-5 seed game. Mount Juliet, 9-1, is a 4 seed.
It's tough. It kind of speaks to the depth of competition and the depth of good teams that you've got going here right now. And Mount Juliet's a team that went 13-0 last year, advanced to the semifinals, lost at home to a really good Whitehaven team, left a little bit of a taste in their mouth, lost a lot of seniors. I don't think anybody really expected them to be as good as they've been this time around, but Roger Perry always does a great job over there, and they're back here 9-1 and as a 4 seed, like you said.
Still find that hard to believe. The other game, got to take a long trip out of Nashville, Overton. The Bobcats traveling all the way to Arlington. Overton 6-4, Arlington 8-2.
Interesting ball game. Haven't had much of a chance to find out or to check out Arlington. Overton is a ball club that is predicated on the run. They got a couple of really nice running backs, and if they can pound the rock and control the clock, they're going to have a chance to come back up I-40 and play again the following week.
I was going to say, because they would catch the winner of Wilson Central 8-2 at Brentwood 9-1. The Bruins just took up where they left off.
Despite a coaching change, brought in Mark Pemberton from Macon County after Ron Crawford left and went to Cleveland, and like you said, they just picked up where they left off. Their only loss was a couple of weeks ago to Blackman on a blocked field goal return for a touchdown. 22-21. 1 point standing between Brentwood and 10-0.
But sometimes is that not better to go ahead and take that loss now, get it in the regular season if you're going to get one, and then win out?
Absolutely. I've had that conversation with a few folks here over the last few days. I'd much rather get that loss in the regular season where it doesn't really hurt me, where it gives me as a coach a chance to get my team refocused, where it gives me as a player a chance to get refocused and then move forward and make a deep run.
We go to Division II and go to their Class A, which is actually, I want to say the small. I guess it's not the smaller of the two. Their Class A is the larger of the two. No, they're just smaller. Yeah, there's not as many teams there, and they are stretched across the state, even beyond. Catch this one. First game we want to look at, Donaldson Christian Academy, 6-4. They'll be at home against Southern Baptist Educational Center, SBEC, and to get here, the 4 and 5 Trojans are going to have to cross the state line. The school's actually in South Haven, Mississippi.
It's an oddity. I think what took place there is that SBEC was originally located in Memphis. I think they purchased some property to expand their campus, and they purchased that property south of Memphis in South Haven. So they've retained their membership in the TSSAA, continue to compete as a TSSAA school in Mississippi.
The other game down that way, Ezel Harding, 6-5, they're at home against 8-2 Fayette Academy. 6-5 at home, 8-2 on the road.
Sometimes it's not how many, but who.
Right ones.
Yep, and apparently Calvin Hall and the bunch out at Ezel Harding won enough of the right ones to play at home this Friday night against Fayette Academy.
Now, if you think that's strange, the winner of this game will face the number 1 seed in that bracket. That's the Evangelical Christian School from Memphis that has a 4-6 record. And they're the number 1 seed coming out of the West. That's because the number 2 seed out of the West is St. George's, and they'll be hosting a 4-6 Davidson Academy squad. We were talking about this before we came on the air. 4-6 is number 1, 9-1 is number 2. It's got to win the right one.
Win the right ones. You just got to have those ones circled on your schedule and win those, and it pays off for you.
Obviously, it doesn't matter what you do the rest of the time. The winner of Davidson Academy at St. George's gets to face number 1 seed in this side of the bracket, Franklin Road Academy at 6-4.
Great job for Franklin Road Academy this year under a new coach, Bill Whittemore. Has really got those kids playing with some energy, and they've done a nice job. Got a new facility over there, a new field over there. I think they ripped up some grass and put down some artificial turf. And as I recall, they were still getting that turf put down hours before kickoff of their home opener against Hillsborough. I think I've got a friend whose son goes to school over there, and at 5 o'clock before a 7:30 kickoff, they didn't know if they were going to be playing at Franklin Road or at Hillsborough.
Wow, that's got to be a kicker. All right, let's go to Division II, Class 2A. This is kind of the big boys, I guess you would say, of Division II. These are the ones who really put it out there. Let's open up. Pope John Paul II out of Hendersonville, 3-7. It's got to go to Memphis Briarcrest at 7-3. Probably best known for the blind side.
Briarcrest is best known for the blind side. Yeah. JP2 is probably best known as being the high school of current Seattle Seahawks receiver Golden Tate.
Yes. And Vandy running his brother.
Vandy running back, Wesley.
Wesley went to JP2. Winner of this one gets to go down and visit Brentwood Academy in week 2.
And Brentwood Academy has already beaten JP2, another of those rematches that we keep talking about. So,
and we'll keep seeing those.
Exactly.
You want to talk about rematches? The next one is the one that's really crazy. When BGA at 4-6 has to go back to Chattanooga to face Baylor. Baylor 4-3, the Bears. Why is this a little freaky? Well, they played last Friday night. Baylor won 27-12.
And I think it's going to be tough for BGA to bounce back in a week and change that result. BGA opened up 4-0 and then hit a little bit of a skid there over the second half of their season, and just kind of taking their lumps a little bit. You know, this was a team that had a Big Ten signee last year in quarterback C.J. Beathard and had some really nice pieces, but they were pretty much a senior-dominated team last year. This year in Rock Batten's second season, it's not been quite as easy for the Wildcats.
The last game, oh, by the way, the winner of BGA at Baylor gets the opportunity to travel to number 1 seed Memphis University School in week 2.
If it's Baylor, that's a nice drive.
Oh, I'm telling you. And you know, what a great prize. You get to go face number 1 after 1 week. You got to love it. Final game we'll look at this week. Father Ryan, 3-7, going to go across the street just a little bit and play a 7-3 NBA squad. The winner gets to go to Christian Brothers, number 2 seed. That's in Memphis next week. Be a lot of traffic to Memphis next week, potentially out of Nashville. But in this contest, NBA, I think, has gotten better as the year's gone along.
They really have. They took a couple of tough losses early on to both Brentwood Academy and Ensworth. And like you said, they've just gotten better as the season has progressed.
And if you're wondering, Ensworth, yes, the number 1 seed in any division in the state, I think is fair if everybody played in one group.
And their reward for that is they're off this week.
Yeah, they're off. They get to stay at home. Those are the games that we're kind of following this week. Obviously, next week this list will be paired in half. Maurice, that's the hard part of the opening round. Half of these teams are going home and hanging it up for the year.
Survive and advance.
That's all you got to do now is survive. So once week 1 is over, we'll come back and look at week 2 next week. This is your primer for this one. We'll have results in your primer for week 2 the next time we come back. For Maurice Patton, I'm Joe Williams, and we're all walking the road to Cookeville.
Microcasting for your city. Talkapolis.